Welcome to the Offsite Construction Series. I'm your host, Audrey Gravesic with Offsite Dirt. Today we're literally talking about offsite and what does offsite construction look like? Where did it start and how is it moving forward? We're talking about panelization and different opportunities in that specter. So today we are talking with Gerry McCavghey, and Gerry's going to give us a little outline of how he started Entekra and how his grandfather, or maybe his father's father, actually started in offsite construction. Welcome, Gerry.
Good morning, Audrey. How are you?
I'm doing great. I love the story that you and I briefly discussed about really what is offsite construction and how does it really begin on the site?
Well, I mean, I have some very strong views on what real offsite is about, because I think that the word is bandied about an awful lot in the industry currently, and a lot of the time, not most of it, but a lot of the time, people are not referring to what really is what offsite is really about. And I suppose I could sum it up by saying that if it's not a system, it's not a solution, and if it's not a solution, therefore it's not offsite. And what I'm trying to separate us from, and the people in the true offsite industry, are people who manufacture small little pieces of elements that go to site and call them, offsite construction, when clearly they're not. And I would say that probably that's part of the reason why up to now, relatively recently, offsite construction hadn't a larger percentage of the US market than it currently has, because what was being supplied to the market wasn't offsite, although people were calling it that, but it wasn't delivering the benefits that the builders wanted. And therefore there was a certain amount of skepticism about its ability to deliver efficiency. But I see now that more and more companies are switching to the solution form model, the system-based model, and builders are now starting to see the benefits of that, and hence you're starting to see all this interest in offsite construction.
And I love that you're talking about the solution, and I also love that you are also talking about a process. So how does your process start with Entekra? How did you guys begin this company?
Well, I mean, it goes back, if you want to say, it goes back probably 50 years in one sense, in that Entekra is the third offsite business that my family has founded. The first two were in Europe, in Ireland. The first one being by my dad, who was a carpenter by trade, who emigrated from Ireland to the United States, discovered wood framing in the US and in New York, came back to Ireland in the early 60s and thought, oh, this idea of building wood frame homes was a good idea, and set up his first business to build those homes. But it never crossed his mind to stick frame, even though that's what he was. He was a carpenter. It just, to him as a European, the most efficient way to do this was in a factory environment. So he set up a little small factory in a small town in Ireland and started manufacturing everything that was required to build a home. But again, he started out as a system. He was doing the floors, the walls, the roof in a factory and bringing them out to site, putting them up with his brothers actually at the weekend. But lo and behold, that small business that he started actually started an industry. And that business that he started went on to become a large employer in Ireland, and really kick-started the whole offsite industry in Ireland in the early 60s. And then by the mid-80s, he sold out of that company. And I was actually living in California at the time, after having graduated from University College Dublin, and I had written a lot of reports on the offsite industry for my thesis. And he phoned me one day and said, "You remember that report you wrote when you were in college about building an international offsite company? Did you believe it was true?" And I can remember saying to my dad, "Well, I can't really remember anything about it, but I don't think anything that I wrote was actually untrue at the time." And he said, "Well, if you think that it was true," and he sent it to me. He actually mailed it to me. And he said, if you think that's true, he said, "Why don't you," and his quote was, "come back to Ireland, put your money where your mouth is, and let's have a go at this." And so 3 months later, I actually got on a plane and flew back to Ireland. And myself and my dad and my brother and another gentleman by the name of Jim McBride set up another offsite company by the name of Century Homes. And we rented a 5,000 square foot building. And 15 years later, that company employed 750 people. We had 5 factories, 3 in Ireland, 2 in the UK, and we were exporting as far away as Japan. And that was the largest offsite company in Europe at that point in time. When you offsite, I mean by advanced panelization. And so in 2005, we sold that company to Kingspan, which is a large publicly quoted building materials company in Europe. And I stayed on until 2008, and then moved to the United States after that. But it was the middle of the Great Recession, when the housing market was catch a falling knife. And I just kept looking at the way houses were built in the United States and wondering, why are they doing it this way? Why are they using a technique that's pretty much 200 years old and nowhere else in the world would even contemplate building that way? And I always thought, okay, there's going to come a point in time here where I want to start back up again. And so in around 2017, decided, okay, let's have a go at this in the US, and put together a lot of the team that I'd worked with in Europe before, and set up Entekra in Northern California.
It's beautiful. And so today, what type of products are you doing? Are you doing single family? Are you doing multifamily? And then also, Gerry, I think it's important for you to actually explain what is panelization, because for a lot of people, I think they envision maybe something than actually what it is. And so if we can refer to that photo and look at it, maybe you can give us an overview of really what is panelization.
Well, I mean, it's a very good point, Audrey. And this is where I'm coming back to this view that if it's not a system, it's not a solution. And what I mean by that is offsite itself, the whole purpose is to try to bring greater efficiency to the building process itself. And what happens typically in the United States is you have what are called component manufacturers, who are typically lumber suppliers, whose primary objective is to sell lumber. But in order to do a little bit of value add to the lumber, they will sometimes make wall panels, and they send those to the site, and everything else then is just cut lumber for whatever. So they might send the roof trusses out, but it's not a system. Whereas with a true offsite company, the type of panelization that we do is everything is integrated. I mean, we are sitting down with the plumber, the electrician, the architect, the engineer, anybody that basically touches off or is connected to that frame. We're sitting down with them in advance of us doing anything to find out how we can make the whole process more efficient for all of the trades in that house, because we realize that the framing is the single biggest element that determines the speed on that job site, and it also determines the quality of the building. So ours is a total holistic approach, a systems approach to the whole building. So those buildings you're looking at now, we can typically bring that building, for example, that's in the middle of the picture, that's sitting there at plate level, that would have been brought up to that level in about 5 hours by 5 guys using that crane. So that's the effect. So it would typically take anything between 10 and 15 days for that equivalent house to be brought to the same stage if it was being stick framed. And we're doing it in literally less than 1 day. But on top of that, and it's very hard to show this in the picture, the quality and the tightness of that frame are absolutely not comparable to anything that you could stick frame on site, because every element that has been produced on that house has been produced as a result of a CNC file that came from a digital twin. In other words, we have created a 3D model of that building before we ever built it, and we have sent the precision files to the most automated equipment that you can buy in the world to precision cut that to millimeter tolerances. So when you walk around our frame, there's no gaps in it. Everything is tight. It's absolutely precision built. So not only are you getting a faster build, you're getting a higher quality build. But again, if you look at that job site, those pictures, you won't see a dumpster on those sites, because up to the time that the house is at plate level, we pretty much have no waste. So what we bring to site, we're going to use that day. So any of that lumber that you see on the ground around those houses, that's all going to get used and incorporated into those buildings. None of it is going into a dumpster. So it's a more sustainable way to build, but for the builder's perspective, it's also a cheaper way because he doesn't have to deal with that waste removal from the site. So it's that total systematic approach to the job that makes an offsite company different from a component manufacturer.
Yeah, I love that you were talking about all these key components. You know, one, the solution. Two, it's probably a lot has to do with pre-planning. When do you come into the mix? Are you already talking with the architect? And then do we have to have special plans to work with your factory or your system? Or can you take any plans and adapt them to that design?
Well, that is a great question. And it's one I really want to get out there. We can take any plan. There is zero architectural limitation on what we do. That is, again, through offsite, because the machinery that we use does not care what type of house is going down it. Once the CNC file has been produced from that digital twin, it will produce anything. The difference being is that the next time we go to produce that house, it'll produce it exactly the same way as it produced the first one. Because you'll find that for many trades that have to deal on site that you can have theoretically the same house built 10 times on a job site, but it'll not be built the same way. And so when the plumber or the electrician goes to run their pipe or their wire in a particular way, it went that way in one house, but it won't go that way in the next house because it's framed differently. That won't happen on our job sites. Every house is framed exactly the way it was before, because that file is coming from that computer, and that computer only knows to do it the same way as it was programmed the first time. So there's no variation.
I think the other thing that I really love about what you offer, and I love the idea of tightness. I love the idea of actually having an accurate panel system, because you know, when you're on site and you're building, you're dealing with so many different issues, not to mention, what about safety? Are you seeing the numbers on the job site just lowering because you're coming up with this sophisticated system and being able to actually, you know, put these panels together in not only the ease and the quickness of being able to do that, but also less people on site?
Yes, but I want to take one of my other favorite expressions that Audrey touched there is, which seems to be an anathema in the residential house construction industry, is we say precision improves productivity. Right? So in other words, for us, the more accurate it is, the faster and the more productive you are on site. Whereas what you'll typically find in the building industry, the attitude being is, well, if I have to build it to that level of tolerance, it's going to slow me down. But we work it from the other way. By the fact that you build it to a very high level of tolerance, you actually make the system go much faster. So we're working on the basis that quality and precision and productivity all go hand in hand. But to answer your question about safety, absolutely, because one of the biggest things that happens on job sites is actually the fact that people are tripping and falling from material that's lying around the place, and or they're getting back injuries because they're doing heavy lifting. Well, on our job sites, the crane does everything. It lifts every element that there is there. So we're taking stress off the body. And in fact, one of the most nicest compliments that I had from a framer on site one day, when I asked him, well, what do you think about the system? And his answer to me was, and I thought he was going to talk about the quality of the wood or the quality of the lumber or the quality of the frame, but he turned around and he said to me, he said, Gerry, I love this. He said, because in the evening time when I go home, I don't have to take ibuprofen. That was his take out of it. But it does bring up another important point, Audrey, which is, you mentioned there we have less labour on site, but it's estimated that we have approximately 400,000 people short on job sites around the US at the moment. And we also have a rate of attrition of approximately, for every 5 people who leave the industry, only 1 enters. Now, those 5 people who are leaving are all highly qualified, highly trained, and highly experienced. And the 1 person who's coming in is actually younger, which is very good, but also less experienced. What the use of offsite does is it extends the working life of the experienced guys, because those people who are retiring in their 50s, a lot of time they're retiring is because they're burned out and their bodies can't take it anymore. But because offsite takes the stress off the body, it allows those experienced people to continue on in the industry for a longer period of time and help train the new people who are coming in. So it actually adds to helping to solve this labour issue that we have, not just physically on the site by the fact that we have less, but actually going forward to help maintain the number of people that we actually have in the industry so they can train the new people.
Well, that's what I love about offsite. and I love not only just all of those things that you mentioned, but I love the sustainability factor. You know, Gerry, I think that it's really one of those areas that we all have to be cognizant of and really realize, you know, less material waste means less cost, right? We're not using things and throwing them away. There was an image that I'd love to look at, which is basically having to do with your factory. When we look at that image, what is happening here? Is this basically showing us an actual panel being built, or what is this?
Yes, this is a frame tech framing station. So this is completely automated, other than to the extent that the operator is placing the stud into the machine, but he doesn't locate it. The machine locates the stud. So he just needs to make sure that the stud is placed in the position. And what will happen is the machine will move the top and bottom plate to the correct position where that stud should be, based upon the 3D digital twin that we've built of that building. So it'll frame walls at approximately 1.5 meters or 5 feet per minute. So there's no way it can be done. There's no way it can be done in the building site. And you can see he's standing up. He's not bending down. He's not having all the material that's coming to him is all ergonomically designed. So it's all at his height. So it's, again, there's no stress from the bending that he would have to do in the building site. Where, you know, we've seen guys with top plate down on the ground, they're bending over with a nail gun to put nails into it. But even when I talk about that, this machine, when it's nailing into the top and bottom plate, it's precision placing the nails at the maximum distance it can from the top and bottom of that stud, so as to avoid twisting and warping of the stud. So it's precision placing the studs, but it's precision nailing the studs at the same time.
So where do you see the future of what you're doing? Obviously, your family has had this lifespan in an industry of doing these wood frames, doing the accuracy, now changing the performance of how you're working in the factory. Where do you strive next?
Well, I mean, even what you're looking at there, Audrey, this is the funny thing about this. Maybe it's the sad thing about it. I don't know why you want to look at it, but what we're producing in the US today in 2021, and maybe this won't go out until 2022, so let's say it's 2022, what we're producing today is approximately 20 years behind what we were producing in Europe.
Wow.
Years ago when I sold my business. So that just goes to show you how far there is to go in the US. And that's because really Offsite is only at its infancy in the US now. Whereas in Europe, it's been around, Offsite in its true form has been around in Europe for over 50 years. Whereas in its true, and again I say this, Offsite in its true form is really only at its infancy in the US now. And so we're having to take these small little incremental steps every time to introduce innovations to the product, because the industry simply wasn't ready for it or didn't believe it. So there's a lot of scope for where true Offsite can go yet in the US.
I agree, and I'm so glad that we're having this conversation and we're able to actually show people what you're able to do. And I love, again, so many benefits. You know, you've got the solution that you're putting these teams together. You've got the accuracy, you've got sustainability, you've got safety. I mean, how could you not want to move over in the sector? Are you seeing more traditional builders starting to move into this segment? And is, you know, are these conversations at least having them walk through the door like, yeah, I already know about this, I want to do this? Or where are you seeing, you know, these developers and builders at this point?
I mean, it's a great question, and I'd love to answer this one. I mean, it's absolutely dramatic, the difference in attitudes today to say 4 years ago when we started. 4 years ago, it was, you had a lot of naysayers, and particularly it was coming from, I suppose, which is to be expected, coming from the incumbent stick framers who were telling people, well, we've seen all this before, it doesn't work, they can't do it, it won't happen. Those are gone. Those type of negative comments basically have gone because there's too much proof that it's actually working. But what's interesting from my perspective is to see the large home builders as well, who all want the advantages of Offsite, but were a bit wary of taking the chance at it, now starting to switch over in such large quantities. I mean, I don't want to name them on it, but just to say, like, of the top 10 builders, I think we're supplying five or six of them in California currently, and on multiple different sites. So they are starting to switch, And not just on one job site, they're starting to switch on multiple job sites. And then on top of that, you're starting to see, like for example, Pulte did public record that Pulte bought ICG in Florida, which is an integrated component or innovative component group. And they also made an announcement recently that they were going to open up another factory on the East Coast basically doing through offsite as well. So you're starting to see the larger home builders starting to make investments themselves in offsite technology and automation. NVR, which is one of the largest houses, they already have multiple offsite factories. Toll Integrated Solutions, they also have some factories on the East Coast as well. So we're starting to see more and more of the large home builders not alone starting to use it on their job sites, but also starting to make investments in the industry by setting up their own facilities. So I think we really are now at the tipping point in terms of offsite construction in the US.
I agree, Gerry. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing, being innovative and starting it in college with just a paper and having your family believe in you and starting something from another part of the world and then bringing it to the US and having this great success story. We're so thrilled to have this conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Audrey. My pleasure.
And there we go. There's the dirt on Offsite Dirt. Whether you start in panelization, wood frame, or some type of system solution, today's the day to start thinking about it, or at least starting the conversation. Thank you for being here for another episode of our Offsite Construction Series.